claims and those stories and just showing how stupid the Bible is and all the kind of stuff. But then he's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome, and he's progressed, right? So his animation skills and presentation has evolved over time. His brain is brilliant. He also has a channel called just Dark Antics, where it's mostly just him talking and stuff instead of animation. But his animation also covers like hypotheticals and thought experiments about these concepts in ways that we all talk about and address. And I just think it's interesting because there's always, in a lot of these rooms that we have these conversations in, I always find myself going, wow, Dark Matter has a video on that. So,
well, thanks for the pointer. It looks fun. I'm going to spend some time.
I took this class in college called Sociology of Religion. And one of the things I picked up out of it was like style worship, and it went accordingly. Those who were typically at the lower end of the ladder had lives with a lot of unpredictability, tended to gravitate more toward strict religion, versus people who, I'll use my church as an example, people who are mostly middle class, a couple of affluent people. That religious worship tends to be more formalistic. It tends to be, dogmatic is not the right word, but it tends to adopt a much more formal structure and ends up being less about the journey and more about the people, more about the people you're in the building with. And the thing I picked up, the reason I'm mentioning this, is the thing I picked up out of it was, if people's lives are unpredictable, they have a greater tendency toward religion. If their lives are predictable, they have less it strikes me as a very dark age medieval way to approach it.
Yeah.
But that's why seminary school is also called cemetery school, right? Because seminary is where most atheists go to die. And I don't mean like when you're studying like religion from a theological perspective, but when you study religion from a historical perspective, and you know, like you guys all know, devout Catholic all my life, and it was when I got to college, Fordham, which is again a Catholic university, and I decided to do just 2 years of Bible study. That was the beginning of my deconstruction, because I didn't understand why at the higher levels of education, they're pretty much telling you that historically the historicity of these stories is not likely true. But how come this doesn't make its way down to the parish, to my church on the corner?
It rests on a very shaky historical context. I think what's the guy's name that wrote Nailed? Yeah, it's like if you can Fitzgerald, if you can knock out, for example, the existence of Abraham, which is really easy from a historical archaeological perspective. Well, a lot of other stuff has to fall too, just from that, right? If you don't have an Abraham, there's lots of other things you don't have.
So hold on to this because it's all about community.
Yeah, definitely is. I think particularly with some of the older stories, and I always kind of go back to Abraham. You know, if you don't have an Abraham, you don't get to a David. You know, and if you don't get to a David, you don't even get to any prophecies. You know, and if you don't get to any prophecies, you don't get. It's like it all just falls apart. And I just feel like you said, Daryl, people holding on to these things. I just can't understand it really. You know, I have a hard time holding on to them as fact. I don't mind holding on to them as stories. That's great. Some of them aren't that great, but okay, fine.
Then as for Moses, right?
Yeah.
Like, just that alone, like done. Like now the scaffolding is hacked on.
Yeah, I took a Christianity class up to 1453 in college. And while
And you just sort of saw this. Maybe you see this corpus of stuff as mythology being a powerful, tool to generate faith. But I'm kind of like, that seems kind of weird, kind of backwards to me. You know, like how does that work for you? That the less you know it's true, the more it becomes an article of faith. I don't really understand that.
yeah, I don't have a logical explanation. That was the effect of the course. Like I can't tell you why it logically drew me closer. It just did. If I had to hazard a guess, it probably brought me closer because I was able to understand the early parts of the history, what was true, what wasn't true. We didn't cover the Old Testament; we just covered the New. But that exploration, like how it got spread.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff I found very interesting. I still, as I said, have this faith piece with Christ, but I can easily admit that there's not a lot of archaeological evidence. Again, I can't tell you why it made my faith stronger, only that it did. And that seems rationally, that's oxymoronic. It doesn't make much sense. To be frank, I don't have another way to make sense of it.
I'd look at this one possibility because I think this is a thing about religious faith because it is important that it survives evidence to the contrary because that's all there is. So when you actually do some kind of a study and really find out that there's no evidence, and you have a choice to make, right? Whether you're going to change your mind about things or stay. And if you're going to stay, you're going to have stronger faith because of what happened. And I say that because I contrast it with, I often say, I have faith in science But it means a completely different thing. It means that my faith in science is that if science shows me I'm wrong, then I'm going to know I'm wrong, and I'm going to have to change my mind. That's what my faith in science requires of me. It's an interesting difference between the two.
It's definitely something you get in debate in these rooms, is they will ask you about your faith in science as if it means the same thing as their faith in God, and it's two completely different things, completely different uses of the word faith. So, but it is interesting, Marshall. I mean, my brother is a minister, and he's also a minister. And so we've had this conversation also, and some of what you're saying sounds a little like him. It's like the mystery of it, right? The community of it, the fact how much help it was to him when he had some trauma in his life, and he also ties it in with his love of physics. What does he call it? The balance of equations. When equations balance perfectly, and he thinks that's really sort of like, mystical. But it's definitely an interesting sort of approach. But I guess one thing I would ask is, when you were studying all this other stuff, did you ever study anything else? Like, did you ever study like a history of literature, or a history of anything else where you have to apply those tools in a different way?
So I was a history major. I majored in Middle Eastern history with a minor in counterterror and sociology. So I took several history courses: history of the Republic of Rome, history of ancient and modern China, history of Nazi Germany. Taught with a guy who lectured in Germany for a couple of decades. As well as, hip-hop and philosophy.
So there is some curiosity about other... Yeah.
I'm very curious. If you stick history in front of me, I will consume it. I really don't care what subject in history it actually is. I just like history.
Have you ever read any of the ethicist stuff?
I want to quickly chime in.
Sure.
You're muted, Alfonso. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I think I might have been breaking up, but I wanted to quickly comment on this notion that when people say, well, you have faith in science, it's no different. I think foundationally, the human experience is very similar, right? It's never identical. But where the difference lies is that our faith or our belief or our trust in sources comes from scientific process, right? It's a process that has been tested. But the way we look at the information, the way we read a scientific text is not that dissimilar to the way a believer reads the Bible. They might say, no, I know it's not a science book, but the authority that they see in it and the truth that they find in it is very similar. So I think from a human experience, we have to be honest that it's pretty much the same. What they're missing is what I was missing when I was a Christian, which was, why should I read any other book? Why should I find any other knowledge if the Word of God itself is here? So I really didn't feel motivated to researching much outside of it. And I would assume that the majority of Christians do that as well.
But the book tells you to do that too, right? I mean, that's part of my problem with it. The book says, faith is belief in things without evidence. And science says faith is belief in things with evidence. Yeah. And that's fundamentally different.
Exactly. But I don't think it's neuropsychologically different. Okay. Because the experience they're having within that is, the authority that they see in it is very much akin to the way we are reading it and we're experiencing it, right? We're probably going to have less mystical experiences and moments of awe, right? We're going to be a little bit more analytical and mathematical. But at the end of the day, the way our brains work is we've been conditioned to take a certain authority for granted, like blindly almost. And then when we come across someone who believes differently, you can't deprogram the person because it's a linguistic, it's linguistic neural pathways that are like ingrained there, and half of it they won't understand, half of it they won't connect. But at the end of the day, the experience is the same. That's why we can't really agree or convince each other.
It's like, can we account for people whose minds have been changed, though? Like, there's lots of people in this room who are saying, I used to be this, and now I'm this, you know?
So in my example, Frank, like, my brother and I, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. My brother and I are very different, right? I'm very rational. I'm more logic driven than my brother is. My brother's much more emotional than I am. You know, it's interesting because the science and the religion thing, like science wants to explore and religion wants to obey is how I started to see it once I hit college. And I think Alfonso is right, when he talks about, the brain. I think it was New York University did the study, and they hooked these people up who considered themselves to be religious, right? Meaning like, not just I believe this, but I actually have religious experiences per se, right? So they hook these people up, they wire up their brains, and what they noticed is that this was a 2-year study they did. So people who claim to have religious experiences, the same parts of the brain lights up as people who claim to have ET or UFO experiences, and they were then able to like stimulate like these parts of the brain, and once they did the stimulation, people claim to have experiences. I think all of this shit is in the human brain.
That's awesome. Yeah. I often say when I'm talking to people is that, we have a very limited sensor package, right? Like, everybody on this stage has 2 eyes, they have a heart, they have lungs, nobody in this room can hear into the ultrasonic spectrum, nobody here can see, infrared light, it's like our sensor package is so limited that I think that's why our stories are so similar. Like, I always use the example of you look at a mountain, right? I live near the Alps, and I look up and see these huge mountains, and it's awe-inspiring. I'm going to push back on you, Alfonso. I think we have just as much awe. But I would say that, you look up at a mountain, and your first thought is, well, that would be an achievement, right? Climbing that mountain would be an achievement. And typically, if you have to, navigate in a mountainous area, it is an achievement. And that's a very human thing. And so when we start creating symbols for what our gods look like, we're going to use those same symbols. Mountains, pyramids, temples, all that kind of stuff, because of our limited sensor package. It's like we're all kind of seeing within a bell curve and experiencing the same things, and just radically different outcomes.
Yeah, and I agree that we all have, we have a sense of awe. I preach this as an atheist constantly, right? I'm like, how can consciousness emerge out of atoms and molecules and all this? How can the universe and the earth be so huge, and how can my brain entertain the beauty of temperature and sexual attraction and eating food and all these things? I do think that's a huge thing, and people think, because you're an atheist, you don't experience these things.
Yeah.
but I think one of the foundational differences is a Christian's life, and the more fanatical you are, the more it's about the awe, about the experience, the transcendence, the moment where you're connecting. So I reconnected with Hare Krishna movement here in Bolivia. I used to be a Hare Krishna monk as a child. And I reconnected, and I made a friend.
I remember that about you, yeah.
Yeah. And a good friend I just made a really good friend who's one of these very hardcore Christians who's convinced it's the end of time and Donald Trump is the chosen one to lead us into the apocalypse or something. And so Friday night there was a program in the Hare Krishna place. This lady was telling the story of Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, which is a companion. Probably nobody knows what I'm talking about, but it's the appearance of it's a manifestation of Krishna, right? It's one of his. It's like Christ a little bit. It's like when God came to earth, and the preaching was so similar, right? It was like, and so he knocked on everyone's doors and he asked them to chant Hare Krishna, and he was so forgiven because he was, they cast a stone in his face. And then they broke it, and he forgave them. And then everybody realized he was the true God, and they kneeled and they apologized. So there's, all these narratives are so similar. So you see that they're focused on the idea, and at the end of the thing, I was added to the chat of the temple, and they're all like, "Oh, this was so enriching, so wonderful. I felt so nurtured and." It was such a transcendent, mystical experience. Same thing with Christians. And which I think is like Alain de Botton said in his video, Atheism 2.0, that's what we're missing as atheists, right? We don't have a moment where we can create this addiction to truth and wisdom and science. And yell out, all hail Einstein, all glories to whatever, Newton. And so I think that's that's why I said they're really, really focused on perhaps not being in awe, but having the experience of being in a group, in a tribe where you're supporting each other. Which everybody does in a concert. Will say, like when atheists talk, I'm like, yeah, I still do that. I go to a music concert or I go to a lecture or do this and that. But it's not as similar to, going every Sunday, once a week, and even sometimes during the week to a Bible study and spending 20 minutes, half an hour, praying and connecting with yourself and meditating, right? All these things are really important, and we dismiss them as if, it was like, yeah, it's superstition and bullshit. I don't care about it. I think one of the main differences, the fact that, at least me, I myself, and most of us here, are very much about logic and we care about emotions, but there's something foundational in humanity, which is that oxytocin releasing ritual, which makes you addicted to your group. And actually, I don't know if it would be better or worse, because we would probably become more tribal and start hating religious people more. But that's foundationally a difference.
I would just push on one thing, and that is that if you are a creator of something, let's say a musician, and you do have to work at your craft. You can't be a musician and not practice, for example. You do get that recurring sense of awe and that sense of craft and awe, and on an ongoing basis that you wouldn't get from just going to a concert once every couple months. But the performing as a musician also, it's like that when I'm performing, it's very transcendent. Performing is, but it takes that weekly work also. So I think maybe there is something about whether you're creating it or just experiencing it occasionally that makes a difference too.
Well, I'm a music theater actor, so I know the experience, and it does a very similar thing. You connect with the people, you perform, emotions, you transmit stuff through music, through dance. So I don't think we're that. One thing that we keep pushing to each other is atheists are this, atheists are this. When the overlapping between the different tribes and labels is a lot greater than the differences.
Sometimes.
I think most of the time.
I don't know. I suppose maybe if you choose your audiences carefully, but if I look at the world written large, I'm kind of going with what Daryl says. It's not looking good out there. It's not looking generous towards humanity at the moment.
And that is one thing that a lot of people would argue, and I'd be at the front of the line, that I absolutely do not choose my audience carefully. My audience is anybody and every.
Yeah, and I think that's where we meet each other, because I stopped asking people for their labels, for their beliefs, for their politics. And when I engage in a conversation just about our daily lives, our work, our hobbies, all these differences in this, oh, you're an atheist, you're an asshole, or you're a theist, you're a superstitious guy, falls apart. And the world shows that. You go into work, and you might have Muslims and Christians, and they're all in there doing the work, right? Things aren't popping out, and people are like, oh, I'm not gonna service. Well, you might find a few people who say, you know what, my beliefs don't allow me to serve this customer in such fashion. Because we start to describe human behavior, causality, nature, and it very well tells me that first and foremost, why should I punish anyone unless, traditionally, yeah, we need to punish each other or put people away in jail. But the new paradigms are telling us it's all deterministic. A criminal became a criminal, used, or he was raised in a maladaptive environment, what have you. And so you lose all these normative claims that come from traditions of philosophy and politics and religion. And so, I call it, it's yeah, it's all scientism. It's going to allow us to understand the world. And therefore, I don't think it's about, being pessimistic or being positive, optimistic. It's about looking at the way the world is functioning. And yeah, there's days that I'm very pessimistic, but that's due to my brain chemistry that day, or because I encountered someone who makes me feel that way. And the next day I'm optimistic. What I strive for is to see the empirical evidence and say this is the world, the way the world functions, and hopefully I'll take it back to work towards thriving as a human.
Yeah.
I always took science. I always took science as a way to explain things that had previously been thought of as magic, or that one put an article of faith in that science explains how that works, right? Like I'm a survivor of an autoimmune disease called aplastic anemia. While I'm a Christian and I believe in God and I prayed and all that stuff, the thing that saved me was modern medicine, on the know-how and the scientific data behind that. So I think that's how I think of science. I'm not one of those Christians who goes, no, science, bad idea. No, in fact, I think there needs to be more funding for science, not less funding. Granted, I also think there should be more funding for history programs, but I'm biased there.
Yeah, one of the things I say about science and religion is, you could start making a list of religious claims that were overturned by science, and it's a very long list. And you could make a list of things that religion is overturned about science, and there's nothing on the list. And it's an interesting fact, right? I've never heard falsification. That's a different question. But the question then becomes, why is that? What does that tell you? What does that teach you? And it teaches you that if what you're pursuing is concordance with reality, then science is going to match up better. Science is a better way to get there. That's just what I see. Maybe that's not
this is the approach I take, right? I welcome philosophy and religion and everything into the science of they're incredibly imprecise. I'm going to bring you back up a moment. They're incredibly imprecise. They have tested the world. They've for example, for generations, someone started taking their neighbor's property, sleeping with their neighbor's wives, and that created conflict and murder and what have you. So they came up with a law that said, covet thy neighbor's possessions, right? And then they said, do not worship another god before me. Well, what does that entail? Do not, fraternize with other tribes. Don't believe in the bullshit they believe in, right? So I think the main difference is science brings us precision, right? It's no longer philosophy and religion. They're all telling us how the world works. They're falling aside to traditions and rituals, and science is taking preponderance, whether we want it or not. It's taking absolute preponderance in our lives, and these other practices, they're trying to incorporate science to find scientific or pseudoscientific arguments, but again, the baseline experience is very similar, and that's where the big difference lies. That it is, let's say, a pseudo-scientific experience, what all humans are going through, because it works. Things work even with their lives, right? If you're in a church, you'll be like, yeah, I pray so I felt the Spirit of God. It's not true that the presence of God was there, but it's a collective thing that keeps them together, and according to them, it has an outcome that they come together, whatever it is, right?
But why does it never stand up to let's just take what you said, prayer. We know that prayer fails empirically 100% of the time, and in any sort of true study of it, I'm not talking about an individual anecdotal thing, but any true study of prayer has demonstrated that it has, zero outcome impact. And that's interesting to me, that something that is that easily disputed and debunked still maintains so much power.
I think the explanation is... Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. It's that talking about sort of just meditating, right? We sort of have explanations for that sort of, group experience. I did Quaker meeting for years, just because I love the silence, and all that stuff. But I'm talking about actual intercessionary prayer. It's
the experiments they did where they prayed for. Dawkins talks about in his book, The God Delusion.
Yeah.
How they pray for this group, and then they have a control group where they don't pray for the group, and in one, so two groups are prayed for, one isn't. One of the groups that are prayed for is told they're being prayed for, and the other one isn't told. And like you said, there's no evidence of anything happening, except that the people who knew they were being prayed for apparently did worse.
Yeah.
The assumption is that that the idea that you're told that you're being prayed for is because you're probably in bad shape, even scared.
Or you might just, maybe keep smoking cigarettes because you're being prayed for or something,
Yeah, but it's not, again, it's not logic, or at least the foundations, the axioms on which logic are predicated, that rule over whether something is believed to be true.
Yeah.
So the way prayer works, I think empirically, is people get this sort of certainty. Un poquito más.
Is it going to be popcorn, Alfonso?
Oh, yeah. I'll give you the mic in a second. So I think what actually happens that works when we pray is that especially when it's out loud, people are saying things that when like people want to hear. People. You're self-conscious, and you're saying things that you subconsciously want others to hear, or what you're aspiring to. So it has a social function, right? Now, when you're praying on your own, it's a similar process, but you're speaking to the several people inside your mind, right? Because you think that there is a God listening. So prayer does have an effect, just not the supernatural one of, like you said, provoking, owning a car or finding a parking
Ethics are. I recommend them to everybody. Incredibly brilliant, incredibly persuasive. Also in medicine, regarding prayer and so forth, I remember asking my pediatrician friend about this. I think it was cardiomyelitis, something that one of the kids in my son's class had. Like, oh, this kid's only going to live a few years. He's got this disorder. And birth defects. This kid had a lot of issues, although he was a very happy kid. And I said, so what's the deal with it? How does his parents deal with this? You know, because even the fact that my friend's kid had this was disturbing to me. He said, well, weirdly, now this was a kind of a, this idea that there's secular Jews and non-secular Jews is a misunderstanding. There are Jews who sometimes proclaim their secularity, but they do many of the Jewish rituals anyway, because they're also part of culture and tradition. You know, everything from food and keeping kosher to resting on Shabbos or fasting on Yom Kippur. Anyway, he was one of those kinds of Jews who went to synagogue just maybe a few times a year. But, a Jew has a Passover Seder like almost every Jew does. And he said the ones that get through it are the Christian. He was up in a non-Jewish area of New York near Woodstock. The families that cope with it best are the ones who are believing Christians, because that's the kind of people that were up there.
Norma, are you going to use your plate?
Can't hear anybody. What did the woman say? Is that the background noise?
Are you going to your plate? Everyone's leaving the room. I know the answer. People are very interesting.
I think you know the answer to the question. Everybody likes their plate. So of course I am. So if you want me
this friend of mine, this Christian friend of mine who I'm hanging out with these days, we're colleagues, we're trying to do some business together. He's like, all the signs are there, everything is, so whatever happens in your life, you interpret to be the fulfilling of a prediction or something.
Well, I think that, let's see, I think about prediction, like, any one of us here could come up with a prediction about pretty much just anything, like I could say, like I predict that in 12 days, somebody would eat a sandwich, in California or whatever, yeah. Like, we could do that, anybody can make those kind of predictions, but we don't really care about those kind of predictions. They're not really teaching us anything. They're not telling us like what's right or what's This was his sort of reasoning here. And so, like, I realized, like, and if that's all right, I'm just curious. Sorry for the interruption. Well, he didn't actually give me, the source he gave me was the Quran. So I don't know exactly when the particular passages were written. I don't remember, like, what the passages were in the Quran, but he repeated it several times to me, so I remembered it. About the battle and stuff like that. I thought, well, I didn't really fully understand like why I didn't feel compelled like at all by this. Like, first of all, I went to go look up the battle, and it turns out like the commander of the Roman forces was one of the greatest generals that Rome had ever had in the history of Rome. So I'm like, wow, that doesn't make this very surprising. The greatest general won a battle. Greatest Roman general won a Roman battle. It was the general. Seemed very surprising. Like Aetius. I don't remember. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's like Aetius. It starts with an A. It ends with a U-S. It might be Aetius or something. You can look this one up. I'm sure I'm probably misremembering. Oh yeah, no, I'll look it up. I know it's really off topic, but it's not off the coast. That's pretty damn good evidence for general relativity and against Newtonian mechanics and against Einstein's earlier prediction of 0.74. Like that is a really good example of what a good prediction looks like. From my point of view, like what makes that kind of prediction so powerful is that it's incredibly risky. You know, like just the prior probability of that prediction of 1.75 arc seconds, of that being true, the probability of that being true is very low. You know, so it's a very risky prediction to make. It can easily be wrong by any number of ways. And so if I contrast something like that with a Roman general won a battle in 450, you know, that seems to be like a 50-50 kind of thing. You know, the Romans could have won or they could have lost. You know, that doesn't really seem very compelling to me. I don't know. Do you guys understand where I'm going with it?
Sort of. I just like that you're talking about history.
spiritual foundations, because under those premises, it makes huge sense. Like, it's all about reinforcing love and understanding with each other and connection and self-transcendence, right? So within the linguistic experience of a human, within a human experience, it's very logical, I think. But when you bring in science, it starts to lose. Typically speaking, I think. Sorry, again, the Bluetooth thing. Scientifically speaking, it starts to lose ground. But because of the axioms and the foundations of what have become our understanding of what it means to be spiritual, what it means to connect with others, to strive for something better, and given the assumption that we're a soul and not a body, right? And that's, I think, what something atheists, I don't know.
This isn't my only election strategy. Obviously, playing music all day long is not a great political communication, but it is great relaxation. And I believe voters make their best decisions when they're deeply relaxed. You can go to Sora or YouTube if you want to check out John Kitover's relaxation videos for voters of the 16th district. So I'm creating clips of these little 2-minute pieces, 1-minute pieces using the Santor. I believe this Santor came out of Esfahan near Tehran in the Iran. This comes from the personal collection of the Ali Khamenei. I hope you enjoy these mystical little pieces played by your favorite performer and candidate Congressman, John Kitover.
There has never once been a scientific experiment to prove or disprove God. And she asked me, how do I know that she's not what she says she is? And I says, because of that fact. And then, yeah, there you go. I remember that.
Yeah, I remember because God is unfalsifiable. I knew that. But my point is that I think that there's never going to be any kind of agreement ever between the two groups because the groups are holding a different game. You guys are literally asking the actual question, is it real? Like, is there really a God, like, actually existing in this universe doing things? And I don't think that question for the vast majority of, for example, in this case, Christians, I don't think that matters to them.
Are you speaking literally or figuratively?
What do you mean, about the Christians or about the belief?
What you just said, are you speaking literally or figuratively?
No, literally.
Okay, well, if I may, with all due respect, then your statement is wrong, and the reason why it's wrong is because I'm not asking any questions. I'm saying I don't believe that God exists. I'm not asking questions. Please continue.
Okay, sure. I was talking about them. I'm saying that they don't care about the question whether it's true or not. They don't care, the Christians, in majority. There are a few, I think, like the fundamentalist Christians that actually do believe that God is literally real. But I think for the majority of them, that's not the power that religion has. I think that it being not real is part of why it's powerful. Because you're saying even if you're wrong, I'm on your side. There are political groups like this where they'll say, I'm going to support you. Doesn't matter if you're wrong. Doesn't matter, if the guy, hates a certain race of people. I don't care. I'm supporting you because I'm on your side, right? Doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. And I think this is why there's never going to be a breakthrough to that side, because they're not following the same goal as you. You're here looking for what's true. They don't care. For them, it's what's the benefit. It's not who's right. It's not what's right. It's who's right? If, for example, that other group, to actually challenge what they believe will require going against certain groups of people, will require burning their affiliations. And it seems kind of, I don't know, I just don't see a breakthrough. Like, I think that there can still be really good discussions. Like, for example, a question I heard that I really like and I'd like to hear tackled is that even if God is not real, when it comes to human history, humans have kind of evolved, co-evolved with religions. Like, religions have been, not all the time, obviously, but for a long time, we've had religions in our societies that keep order. I don't know if you've heard this one before, and I'd like to hear what you think or anyone else thinks, that religion is a part of humanity in the sense of it helps people make decisions, even if the decisions aren't themselves very logical. Like, for example, the marriage one is a great example. They'll say, a man or a woman doesn't have to understand why it's important to be monogamous. They only need to fear the consequences of some bogus God punishing them if they're not. So what do you think about a lot of beneficial things that humans do? Do you think that humans are capable of doing things if they don't have a religion to punish them for doing it? Or you think that the modern person in aggregate, they don't need that? They can absolutely make those decisions. They don't need the hocus pocus anymore. What's your position on that one?
Well, my answer is you literally asked 5 different questions in the past 30 seconds. So my position is, if you would be so kind, why don't you ask the questions again one by one? I'd be more than happy to give you my position.
Oh, you can pick your favorite one, but I'll pick one if you want me to.
I want you to.
I can answer one of them, if you like.
Sure.
But you know what, Elliot, go ahead, please, by all means. Please, Elliot.
I like the last question. Do we need to have consequences for our actions? And the way I interpreted your question was, we need consequences for our actions from a divine authority. That's sort of the way I interpreted your question. And it turns out clearly the answer is no, because that was probably one of the primary things you get from what came out of the Enlightenment and all the Enlightenment thinkers is that reason trumps divine authority. Like, we can reason to how we should govern ourselves. We can reason to what we should do, what's right and what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral. That we can reason to these things, and that human reason is more important or better suited, perhaps, than divine authority.
Battery is at 100%.
Or something like that. So I don't know if that answers that.
I agree with you. I think it's possible. But what do you think about people in aggregate? You think everyone is capable of doing that, or only certain people? How do you think the distribution falls in terms of population?
Oh, it's called a Santor. Now we are free.
Is that a question for me?
Yes, this is Hans Zimmer. This is the new Hans Zimmer performing for you new Hans Zimmer music. I hope you enjoy the show.
The right thing is,
like the live stream. Share the live stream to your X account, to your Meta story. We are recording new Hans Zimmer. The new song. We will finish now. We are free.
I think human beings generally can figure out what's right and wrong. You could give them the tools for how to do that, and you give them the evidence, they can figure it out by themselves.
I can't actually. It's difficult.
But that doesn't mean that this will always happen. That doesn't always happen. But
This is
I think by and
naturally
large,
grown
at least
Illinois cannabis.
certainly modern humans.
Now, smoking is not healthy for you.
This.
It's very damaging to the body.
Most people can do it. Is that right?
And if you partake,
I
suggest you play some music. Do something productive with the additive chemical to the bloodstream, to the brain consciousness. Hello?
If you want to talk, or just popcorn, just preferably one person at a time.
Yo, what up, Sam? Hello. Are you still in deportation? I think a more broader point about there are claims that are made by different religions and different religious folks that we can go and test and we can find out whether they're true. Some things we can't test, like whether there's power or not. We can't really test that directly, but maybe we could in some indirect kind of way. And I think there's at least 3 different ways we can go about doing that. Like one, we can test miracles. That's one way we can do this kind of test. Another is testing predictions that are made by prophecies, and another is testing like the efficacy of prayer. It seems to me that when we do all of these things, it turns out that all the none of the evidence goes towards the gods or the religion side of things. Ours goes towards the atheist or the secular or naturalist side of things. That's just, I don't know.
Never had one lesson.
Should be an atheist.
Because there's no evidence.
Well, it's not that there's no evidence. It's that a lot of the evidence that we do have, like anybody can do a Google search on prayer studies. So there have been studies done on intercessory prayer. Okay, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
I have never heard the term intercessory prayer, and I can't look it up right now, but I don't know what that means.
To intercede.
I thought all prayer was to intercede, no?
It's to intercede in behalf of, to ask for something so that it is provided to another person. Like,
not yourself. Not yourself.
Yeah.
Uncle Steve loves to make assumptions.
Gotcha.
And you know what they say about guys that like to make assumptions, right?
So basically, asking for a miracle, asking for someone to get healed, asking for
as a Presbyterian, we may pray for intercession by God. But unlike the Greek Orthodox, the Roman Catholic Church, or the Episcopal Church, we don't have any intercessionary beliefs of saints. Because we're Protestants, the whole saint thing is kind of verboten in Calvinism.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Like with Catholics, when they pray to saints, they're praying to ask the saint to ask God to intervene. It's this weird chain of command that they sort of follow in their prayers, right?
So I just mixed it up. It comes from a belief that they can't directly talk to God, versus Protestants believe you can directly talk to God and directly have a relationship with Him. And I think that's highlighted in the Catholic Church, but also the Orthodox and Episcopal Church.
And very quickly, I'm aware I read a scientific study that was designed to determine whether or not prayer works. And the study, regardless of its reliability or credibility, responsibility, did find that prayer works, but it absolutely stopped short of saying that God exists. And when I've told people that before, well, of course God exists, because of course if they find that prayer works, I mean, who the hell are they praying to? You know, and well, that's not what the study says. So please continue.
I was going to say something similar. I just looked it up and found several studies noting or supporting the efficacy of prayer. But it seems to be that most of it is about praying for yourself. Like, people who pray generally tend to have better mental health, and then they got higher test scores in the high school. But praying for somebody else's cancer to be healed, the prayer has no effect on that.
Right, because when we measure such things, we also have to measure it against.
It is the
things
tattoo,
like
yes.
Placebo effect, you know, and that's the
Behold the shining light of Hashem,
the whole point of
shining bright upon his people outside of
the
Shemaiah.
placebo effect, because you know one group is not getting the thing, they're getting the placebo, right? And so we know that a pill, a sugar pill, is more effective at curing what ails you, statistically speaking, than no pill at all. And that a gel cap is more effective than a sugar pill. And an injection of saline solution is more effective still than a gel cap, right? And then there's this even weirder thing that we have to defeat. There's the nocebo effect, in which people who are given what has otherwise been demonstrated to be legitimate medicine are told that it doesn't work. And as a result of having told them that, its efficacy goes down, right? So there's something going on with regards to mental health and physical health. They're related. There's something happening there that we can't deny. And the double-blind study in medicine is designed to suss that out.
Well, in regards to mental health, there have been many documented, proven, repeatable scientific studies that prove that a positive mental attitude going into surgery or some type of corrective physical procedure does benefit. If you go into surgery without a will to live, it's documented that your chances of a successful recovery are less. If you go angry right now, why are you asking? You sound so angry when you speak. And that's okay, my friend. I've been accused of that many times, and it's not that I'm angry. And maybe this is something that I have to work on.
He's not angry, he's enunciating.
I was just going to say that not only do I practice, maybe to a fault of enunciating, I have learned to choose my words very carefully, and sometimes I enunciate, which is not favorable to other people. This is because I've been misquoted so many times that I have to choose my words very carefully. So when people later on, today, tomorrow, next year, paraphrase what I say, no, I didn't say that, I said this. Bottom line, fine, and I'll say it differently so I won't enunciate. Positive mental attitude helps physical recovery. Documented fact.
Yeah, Steve is a proud graduate.
I love you, Steve. I didn't mean to criticize you in any way.
No, it's okay.
Teasing you lovingly.
You tease away. Sorry, T.
A proud graduate of the Howard Cosell School of Speaking, right? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, right?
Look at that little monkey go.
Hey now.
Didn't have to go there.
Well, for those of you who didn't know, that's what got Howard Cosell canceled back when even they were canceled.
I wanted to say something about what Marshall said, that Catholics don't believe they can talk directly to God. They have to go through saints. That's not